So this time it's it. It's the final, the finale of the finale. And I'm starting it here because I'm not entirely sure where this one breaks. I would have thought that it was immediately after the massive fleet orbiting Cardassia would be revealed. That seemed like just the perfect spot to say, oh, here's the trouble, and there's where they're going to pick up on it. But the music of the scene flows uninterrupted right into the next scene, so it doesn't seem likely, actually. The only way to know for sure would be for me to go and buy the individual episodes, and frankly, I've paid enough for Star Trek by now. I don't think I need to pay any more for an episode I've already got. So, anyway, let's pick up with the rebels led by Damar, Kira, and Garrick. Their numbers have swollen thanks to the reactions to the Dominion's newfound campaign. But here's scenes from the first part when that decision was finally reached.
Es wurde ein ungeheurer Verrat geübt am deutschen Volke. Aber alle diese Verräter werden bezahlen. Mit ihrem eigenen Blut werden sie bezahlen. Sie werden das saufen in ihrem eigenen Blut.
So in the wake of that announcement, Cardassians are lining up to join the revolution. Only there's the little problem of them figuring out how to penetrate the overly reinforced door. Might I suggest the wall on either side of it? It wouldn't surprise me if someone blew all the budget on the door and had to go with drywall for everything else. Luckily for them, Broca is dragged out to be executed, showing a door is only as good as the idiot who last uses it. The Jem'Hadar are gunned down and the rebels swarm inside. Only Damar seems to forget that the place is full of the enemy, so in his attempt to run in like Rambo, he instead gets shot about 300 times. He dies, so the rest press on without him, and Weyoun realizes that if you send all your forces out to commit genocide, none are left to actually guard your headquarters. In his defense, it was a stupid order in the first place. If you have a stupid plan, you shouldn't be surprised if it doesn't end well. That's what made it a stupid plan. It's like peeing through the window of a squad car. You may really want to do it, but that doesn't mean it won't end badly for you. In orbit, the Allied fleet is prepared for the final assault, but it's looking like as much as 40% will be lost in orbit alone. And then there's the endless planet-side battle against the Jem'Hadar in a ground war that will make Afghanistan look like a polite disagreement. But what they don't know is that headquarters has nearly fallen. Kira and Garrick managed to breach the command center with Weyoun and Sanders, and they tell her she needs to make their forces stand down, both in orbit and the ones slaughtering the Cardassians. She tells them to eat shit, and Weyoun makes the mistake of taunting Garrick, forgetting that he's the only one almost as cold-blooded a killer as Weyoun's boss, so Garrick reminds him of this by fatally shooting him. This doesn't change her mind. She would rather let the Dominion forces fight to the last, just to spite the Federation and all the rest of them. Kira calls up the Defiant before the battle begins and explains the situation, so Odo volunteers to go down and try a diplomatic option, since anything is better than the current end of her melting while raising a middle finger towards the sky. Back in the fire caves, Kaiwin offers some Bajoran chant while holding a goblet, then offers to let Dukat have the first drink. He was lured into a false sense of security by her seeming to want to drink it first, and the belief that the chalice from the palace has the brew, which is true. Instead, it's obvious that the goblet was poisoned.
He chose poorly.
So with Dukat as the sacrifice, she can get on with the ritual. And speaking of slaughter, back to the bunker. After a quick exchange with Kira, Odo turns to Sanders and tries to persuade her, but she says that fighting to the bitter end will discourage the Allied forces from attacking the Dominion in the Gamma Quadrant. She doesn't trust him that they will end the war here and now and not seek vengeance. It simply isn't part of her worldview to think that any Solid wouldn't jump at the opportunity to murder a changeling. So Odo offers the one thing he can, linking with her. But purely to share information and give her the cure. Wouldn't be right to do something like that in front of his girlfriend otherwise. Garrick isn't too crazy about this plan, even pulling a gun on Odo, but after she's cured, she says that she'll have the fleet stand down, and Odo explains that she is going to submit herself to trial and accept punishment for her actions. But in return, Odo must rejoin the Great Link. It's a grim revelation, and it matches the mood as Martok speaks of their great victory to Cisco and Ross. But at this sight, the two humans can't drink their blood wine and instead dump it out. although they might have just seen what happened to Dukat and figured they should play it safe. The news is pretty bad, though. The Dominion already killed 800 million Cardassians by the time they were ordered to stop. That's more than the entire population of Europe. Garrick fumes out loud about the collective guilt of the Cardassians, in essence echoing what Martok had said about the situation, but with contempt for those who would voice such thoughts. Garrick suspects that's what everyone thinks, and while he doesn't say it, it's likely the reason he blows up at Bashir when the latter tries to say some words of comfort, that humans are ashamed of these feelings and try to mask them from others, but they really do have them. Remember that Garrick endured his exile because he believed in an ideal of what Cardassia was. He saw its flaws, but that's all they were, flaws in a priceless gem.
We had a rich and ancient culture. Our literature, music, art was second to none. Now, so much of it is lost. So many of our best people, our most gifted minds.
One gets the sense from Garrick that Cardassia is like a post-World War I Germany, a great power stripped of its might, cultural heritage, and a large portion of its people. One wonders if a Cardassian expressionist movement is going to emerge thanks to this. So on DS9, a treaty is signed officially ending the war, but that has only ended this conflict. It'll be up to Odo to win the peace. When she tells Odo before being led off by security that, "It's up to you now," there's a double meaning. The lives of the changelings and the question of another war is all going to be decided by him. At this moment, the fate of half the galaxy rests in the hands of one person, who doesn't even like people very much. But we're running into the final half hour of the show, so we'll need to tie up some more plot threads. Worf made for a better empire, he hopes, by putting Martok in charge, and now it seems that everyone would like to see Worf be made Federation ambassador to Kronos. This would be undone by Star Trek Nemesis because the movie shits all over everything, so why not shit on the ending of DS9 too? But right now, it's the party in Vix, where Quark insists that everything is wrong. O'Brien, Worf, and even Odo should stay. Things should go on as they always have been. Even the hardened, greed-loving Ferengi doesn't want to say goodbye. After Vix sings a little ditty for them, we return to the fire caves, where Kai Wynn calls out for the Pa Wraiths, and they respond quite reasonably by tossing her into the wall. That's gratitude for you. Instead, one flies into Dukat, restoring him to life and to his true Cardassian form.
Ben, what's wrong?
I felt a great disturbance, as if a character lived on long after he ceased being in any way relevant. Cisco knows that he has to head to the fire caves, and he has to do it alone.
Soon the pirates will burn across Bayshore. The Celestial Temple, the Alpha Quadrant. Can you picture it? An entire universe set in flames to burn for all eternity.
Okay. Pardon my asking, but what do the Pa Wraiths get out of that? Because it seems like, okay, you set everything that there is everywhere on fire. Now what? Well, whatever it is, it sounds like the stakes are pretty high. Maybe a few quantum torpedoes from orbit are called for instead of one phaser rifle. Besides, Dukat starts slapping Cisco around with mind attacks anyway, until he lets Cisco come over and deal with him. As a representative of the prophets, Cisco needs to reflect upon the nature of spiritual enlightenment and its application to the eternal conflict between benevolence and malevolence that is going to shape the entire future of the galaxy and the epistemological issues that this raises. And then, having mulled it over for about 1/10 of a second, he decides to punch Dukat in the face. This accomplishes nothing, and Cisco is fresh out of ideas once punch it is ruled out. Cisco is forced to his knees, where he feebly protests that he will stop the Pa Wraiths, but luckily for him, Kai Wynn is still around and takes up the book. Before she's burned alive, she lets Cisco know that the way to stop them is to destroy the book. So Cisco tackles Dukat and knocks him over the edge, where the book is destroyed, and Cisco is taken away by the prophets.
You returned them to their prison within the fire cave.
The book was the key, wasn't it?
To a door that can never be opened again.
So all this needed was a gallon of gasoline and a lighter, and we could have solved this problem before the second episode. And now Cisco is to take his place among the prophets. That's his big task that he was supposed to do, defeating the Pa race in the cave. All of this is understandable from a strict dissecting of things. After the enormity of the war, Cisco's final triumph should be something personal. Not him in front of an army or of his crew, but him alone. And Dukat has been an issue from day one and needs a finale since we missed the chance to give him his proper one. And the prophets need to be involved because this is tied into Cisco's purpose as the emissary. Putting all of them together like this sounds like the best answer in theory. But in practice, this is all a letdown. For starters, this was a thread that was first being developed months ago to lead to a clash that is, frankly, unremarkable. There are two big reasons for this. First, if Dukat is the nemesis of anybody, it's Kira. He dominated her people, took away her mother, tried to use his authority to start a relationship with her, and generally tried to make her feel subservient. If Dukat has a one-on-one fight with anybody, it should be Kira. Cisco's beef with Dukat is practically nothing compared to a lifetime of chafing under him. Hell, I'd argue Worf had more of a reason than Cisco, given that Dukat murdered his wife, the wife that Worf tanked his career in order to protect. If a character as integral as Dukat had been is now to have a final confrontation, it should be personal. And as far as that goes, you better get in line. Second, we have had a war for nearly 1 hour out of an hour and a half. Cisco resolving this issue in a final battle is anticlimactic after what has just transpired. A couple people have taken issue with jokes that Cisco is a badass, but what else can you conclude when his solution is repeatedly to resort to violence? When even his final act on the show to deal with a problem is attacking someone? I don't write the show. I'm not the one who said that Benjamin Cisco should punch Q in the face, beat up Garrick when he's mad, design and build a warship for the Federation, shoot Maquis ships to kill, fire bioweapons at inhabited planets. Need I go on? The finale was the chance to show the Cisco that we sometimes glimpsed as a budding religious figure who was forced to balance between his role for the Bajorans, his position in Starfleet, and his place in his family. We have seen Cisco the warrior. Why must he resolve his final trial with violence? King David won the war, but King Solomon built God's temple. If the prophets are involved in this finale, shouldn't this be Cisco winning the day through his role as the man of peace and wisdom, rather than the man of war? By this point, they have established Wynn's jealousy of Cisco, both in how the prophets saw him and his own devotion to them. She could have worked to undermine him, cast every military hardship Bajor suffered as Cisco thinking first as a warrior rather than as an emissary from the prophets here for Bajorans. Work to reverse Cisco's efforts to bring the world into the Federation and instead tell the Federation to leave. And then reap the benefits of the war that they have won by how in demand the wormhole is going to be. If Cisco was put into a position of being forced to allow harm to Bajor in order to win the war, and he had to go along with it, it could be all the support she would need, and to in turn take advantage of the power vacuum in this region to significantly expand the planet's influence and power throughout the area. Cisco's failure would not only be in not bringing in Bajor, but the loss of the soul of that world as it was shaped by Wynn's ego and ambition. These are not possibilities. They can be seen through the prophet's existence out of time that these are inevitable. To know that one of those two fates must happen. A welcome addition to the Federation, or the seeds of a Bajor as ruthless as old Cardassia. It would be down to Cisco as the emissary to try to persuade them which path to take. This might necessitate having to give something up and join the prophets in order to have the means to convince the Bajorans which way is correct. So Cisco can still have the ending that he has here, but a different way of getting there. The conflict is not physical, but spiritual. The enemy is not the incarnation of a boogeyman, but the darker sides of humanoid nature. The image of Garrick in the remains of the fallen Cardassia is a warning of the potential future that an aggressive Bajor may face. But this is what we got. And Cisco appears to Cassidy in a similar vision in the midst of discussing the search for the captain. He gives her the bad news, that he needs to stay with the prophets. They have to teach him things to prepare him for what is to come. But eventually, he will be back. The intent of this originally was that Cisco would have to leave Cassidy for good. That's why he would know only sorrow. But it wasn't until after filming the scene that Avery Brooks grew uncomfortable enough to explain his concern. While narratively it was the right move, the tragedy of a man leaving behind his wife and child, there is concern about the unintended subtext when that man is black. So they refilmed it to instead make clear that this is a duty that he must attend to before he returns to his family. But overall, this is a time for goodbyes, and it begins a collection of montages with a notable absence of Jadzia. There's disagreement over this. According to one source, Terry Farrell was supposed to have an appearance in the episode, but for budgetary reasons it had to be cut, and in anger, she raised the price of showing clips of her so that it wasn't feasible. Others attribute this all to her agent being the real problem here. Farrell doesn't speak of it specifically, but voiced frustration that she was killed off rather than allowed to be moved on to a recurring character in the show for the last season, with the implication that she wasn't kindly disposed towards the show that replaced her with another actor for Dax. The montages run around a few silent scenes and lasts about 4 minutes, which is a bit on the long side, unfortunately. It feels a lot longer than that. It seems like this was something that they needed to do more than a service that it provides the episode, because the episode feels like it runs out of steam and stalls out. Yet we know that there were strong emotions from those working on the show, and this might have been their way of saying goodbye too. Ira Stephen Bear is reported to have been the last person to leave on the final day of shooting, after everyone else was gone, even the crew, and he was overheard saying to himself, "I have many years to not be here." Odo is slipping away quietly, just him and Kira since she's flying the runabout. But Quark intercepts Odo before he leaves, wanting to get in a final word about their long rivalry. We saw them break into open hostility back in The Ascent, but now Quark is clearly hoping that the pretense can be stripped away and the two admit their mutual respect despite being adversaries. Odo abjectly denies it, but Quark insists to Kira that it's quite obvious. The two offered a challenge to one another for a very long time, and things won't be the same without Quark needing to watch out for a changeling, or for Odo to know that his greatest quarry ultimately got away from him. When they reach the Great Link, Odo even confesses to Kira that he wants her to say goodbye to everyone for him, even Quark. He probably just didn't want to see the look on Quark's face when he heard it. Anyway, Odo merges with and cures the Great Link, a fitting symbol of him working to purge the corruption at the heart of their worldview, to show them a galaxy where they and solids can coexist. And while there are many goodbyes and questions about the future, maybe that's the one thing we can take away from the finality. That things and people can be better than they were before. At the very least, the galaxy is a little freer than it was.
Well, just between you and me, all bets are off.
What are you talking about?
As of this moment, betting pools of any kind are illegal on this station.
Unless you like gambling, in which case you can fuck right off.
All hail the Overlord! All hail the Overlord!
You've certainly got a lot of choices.
Yeah, too many.
Vince.